hello. It's been a minute. I cannot tell you how many vlogs I have filmed footage for and then never edited. So, I'm trying again. And yeah, much like one of the vlogs that I filmed and never actually edited, I need to get my life together. The month of August has been a little cursed, if I do say so myself. I was supposed to go to Charlotte like the first weekend of August, and I was super excited because I had mapped out like bookstores I was going to go to, and it was just going to be a nice like solo travel weekend to go to a really fun like dress up tea party for my sister-in-law's bridal shower. Someone in the bridal party got COVID, so they postponed it a week. I had to argue with the hotel to finally get the reservation changed to the following week. And then our family got COVID. So then I couldn't go after all. And then I got better from COVID, felt a lot better, and then turned around and ended up in the ER the next weekend, and had emergency surgery to have my gallbladder removed. So August is just, we're kind of batting zero right now. So I will say, not totally batting zero, because it's also been one of the best reading months of the year for me in terms of like actually reading books and in terms of enjoyment. So, that's a plus, because I feel like this year has been a really slow and like not great reading year for me. But anyways, I would normally wait until the beginning of the month to like start a new project, but honestly, I'm just feeling like I have some energy today. Still very much recovering, by the way. Need afternoon, like, I don't need lunchtime naps anymore, but I do have to lay down at some point during every day, because of my like healing like incisions and stuff. But yeah, I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling good this morning. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw random books. I say I'm feeling energized and then I immediately yawn. But, if you've been around my channel long enough, I just feel like I yawn all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna randomly draw books from my physical TBR. So this is all of the books on my physical TBR. And I think I'm gonna try to do 5 books in this vlog. So this may be it may take a long time, it may take a short time. I don't know how this is gonna go. But I am looking forward to just like reading some random books, because that seems to work well for me usually. I've done where I did Shorty September, where I like wrapped them all up and then I would pick a number and then I would just read whatever that one was. So it's going to be sort of like that, except except not shorties, because I actually don't have that many short books on my TBR right now, because I thought about doing Shorty September. But we're just going to do the whole TBR. I will say I'm going to give myself 2 vetoes, so 5 books total that I'm going to try to do. But if there are, I can veto 2 books the whole thing. So like if I pull one out and I just like really don't want to read that right now, then I can veto. I am currently like near the end of Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, so I am not going to include that in this vlog, because I'm almost done with it. But I am reading that right now, or listening to the audiobook of that. Anyways, let's go. Let's draw random books, see how we do. I might put up some like stats about like how long I've had the book, how it came into my home, that kind of thing. Anyways, let's go. Let's draw the first one. Let's see what I'm going to be reading first. All right. That is not a bad pick. That's actually one of the, I said I don't have a lot of shorties, but that's one of them. So this is O Caledonia. So let me grab it. O Caledonia by Elizabeth Barker. I do know why I bought this. I bought this in Asheville, North Carolina, on my birthday trip in, I think, 2022. But this is a book where like something happens at the beginning and then we like spend the rest of the book like leading back up to like how that happened or what happened, which at the time that I bought it was something I was like super into. I'm also seeing that the back is blurbed by Maggie O'Farrell and it says, a surreal, hilarious, and dark story of a troubled adolescent deep in the wilds of Scotland. So that sounds lovely. And I love Maggie O'Farrell. So let's jump in. Let's see how this goes. So I'm a little over halfway through O Caledonia. And first of all, I didn't realize so I saw the blurb on the back from Maggie O'Farrell, but somehow I missed the giant thing on the front that says the introduction is by Maggie O'Farrell. So I read that as well as what I've read so far. And first of all, this is basically a story about a girl named Janet. She's the oldest child in a family with 4 kids, I think. But like she was born first and then her brother was born. And so it's like she was born and then it's like her brother is the like favored child because of the time period, which I actually don't know what the time period is for this. But basically at one point her father actually says like girls are just second-rate boys or something like that. But like she has a really odd upbringing in that like she initially is living with her mother's family, and when she's living there's like a lot of love from the grandparents in the house, but like her parents are not very warm people, and eventually they move to this like big castle manor, and it's like it has kind of like a gothic feel, and then it's just sort of about her, like what does her life look like, but in the beginning we know that she has died. Essentially the very first sentence is we begin with a corpse, and then we're like we go back to when she was born and we work our way back to present day. So right now she's at boarding school, and I'm really enjoying this. I think that if you like Maggie O'Farrell, you would like this. And I would go so far as to say that if you've read The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, that like this will feel familiar, and not in a like Maggie O'Farrell copied Elizabeth Barker, but in a like she was clearly inspired. Like this is clearly, I mean, she says in the introduction what a brilliant writer she thinks Elizabeth Barker was, and she actually talks about how like she used to have to like Elizabeth Barker would send in these things to this publication that she worked for, and she would have to retype them, and she would have to call her. She was like, it's the best part of my week to have to call her. So like she clearly had like a relationship, and then also like a like she's clearly inspired. But yeah, I would say like if you've read The Marriage Portrait and you liked it, you would be this is something you would find interesting. So yeah, I'm gonna finish this and then I'll come back to you with final thoughts. I finished O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker, and I really liked this. I think I give it like a 4.25. to a 4.5, something like that. There are definitely some moments that felt like they dragged in there, but also like it is kind of a slow, just like plodding slice of life kind of thing. So like you're just following this girl for like 16 years of her life, and it kind of, it's not like chapter 1 year old too. It cuts and jumps, and so there's like certain periods of her life where you get a bunch, and then there's certain periods we don't, really hear about it. But I just thought it was really charming, and you get you follow, I think, like I said before, at the beginning of the book, we know that she has been murdered. And so it's like you're following her life up until the point when she's murdered. And that like last chapter where everything goes down is like super tense and sad about how like it actually unfolds. So like, yeah, I just thought it was a beautiful story, and very like you get attached to her, and you kind of empathize with like everything. And also you think like, man, the way that she was treated was awful, and had it been like a different time, which like I never really was sure when this was set, because it's definitely set after the Second World War, but they still are wearing like petticoats sometimes and going to balls. And so I don't know, I couldn't place it time-wise. It was written in 1991. So sometime between like the late 1940s and 1991. But yeah, I just, you would think like, man, in a different time, she wouldn't have necessarily been treated the way that she was treated. Like there was something wrong with her for wanting to be smart and independent and not get married, and she didn't care about boys. And it just, I don't know, it was just really heartbreaking and yeah, sad. So I really liked this. I'm glad that I read it. And yeah. All right. Time again to pick the next one. This makes me so nervous. I don't want to pick nervous. Oh, I should be nervous. All right. Well, the next one is the Stonewall Reader. So let me grab that. I'll tell you what it's about. So here's the Stonewall Reader. It actually, I didn't realize this when I bought it, but it's a Penguin Black Classic that just is like wrapped in this pink outer layer. So this is, I think it's a bunch of, ooh, that's quite dense. It's a bunch of different, like articles. So I'll read you this. It says basically it's a collection of first accounts, diaries, periodical literature, and articles from the LGBTQ magazines and newspapers chronicling the years leading up to and the years following the Stonewall Uprising. So I actually didn't expect to be coming back to you this soon with an update, but I am 100 pages in, and I just finished the first section of this. It's split into 3 sections. So the first is before Stonewall. The second is what happened with Stonewall, and like it's labeled as during Stonewall. So it's like interviews with people who were there, that kind of thing. And then the last section is after Stonewall. So I thought I'd update you at each section. Yeah, I thought that this was going to be like a slow kind of like plodding read, but honestly, some of these accounts are just so enthralling, and I have to hand it to the writer. They definitely chose people who knew how to write. So a lot of these are by authors or poets, or people who had memoirs, and so like they are all really well written essays and articles and things that are included. So that definitely makes it easier to read because you're reading well written, like well paced articles. Um, one of the reasons when I pulled this, I was like, is that I just finished a nonfiction book. So I just finished reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. And so I was like, oh gosh, do I want to dive right back into nonfiction? But actually, this is like, I'm glad this is what I'm reading right now. But it's interesting too, because having just read Cast, there are a couple of articles in here, and take into account that the majority of those, because it's before Stonewall, are like 50s, 60s. So it just, information, I think, was definitely not readily available in the same way it is to us now. So some of the queer white people and the way that they make comparisons and say like that their plight is equal to that of Black people, and that they're being treated in some ways worse, it's just like, no. Like, as someone who is part of the queer community, like, I can walk around in everyday life and, for better or for worse, no one knows that I am queer. Whereas somebody who is Black can't just walk around and not be Black. So, like, the idea that even though obviously there was a lot of oppression and hostility towards queer people, in like the first half of the 20th century, like in the 1900s, it can never compare to what Black people have gone through in this country and continue to go through. And that's not to say that like the current backlash and like political attitudes towards queer people and like the banning of books that specifically deal with like queerness isn't horrific. But I think when you read things like Caste and The Color of Law, and you really understand how our country has continued to create laws and to build upon history that is extremely oppressive to Black people, and the fact that like some people now would be in a very different financial situation, a very different just like emotional situation if some of the things that hadn't been done in the past hadn't been done. And it's like, I can see how at the time it would have been popular to draw parallels between like the queer liberation movement and the civil rights movement, but like now in the year 2024, looking back on it, it's like it just doesn't compare. So that's just my thoughts on some of that was like a wild tangent, but like that's just some of my thoughts on just one or two articles. Like the majority of them don't compare in that way, but there were one or two that did, and that just sort of struck me after reading Cast. So I am back having read the next section of this. This was a section about the actual Stonewall riots, uprising, the night that the raid happened, and then the subsequent like 2 days. So there were a lot of interviews in this section, and then like first person accounts. And it was really interesting because the accounts sometimes contradict each other, and it's a kind of a good like reminder of how different people experience the same event. So I thought that was pretty neat. The the introduction, or I can't remember if it's the introduction or if it's the foreword. One of those talks about the fact that they left in the different interpretations of it as faithfully as possible, because like we don't totally know, what really happened, because all we have is the accounts of the people who were there. So there's like accounts of one of the accounts is from a reporter that was like following the police around that day and was like in the bar when the police got like retreated into Stonewall. It's like his interpretation versus the interpretation of the people who were like in the bar, and then when the raid happened and were made to leave, um, and like were out on the streets with like their friends and like the queer community. And then there's like people who just like sort of were in the area, because one of them is a guy who is homeless and like living in the park across the street from Stonewall, and like they're asking him like how he experienced it. So it's just like all these varying perspectives. They're very interesting. I don't know. I really appreciated that it was like multiple different accounts from different points of view, different kinds of people, and some of them were a little like hard to follow, just because of the nature of the interviews, in terms of like they would go off on like major tangents that weren't necessarily related to Stonewall, um, but were interesting nonetheless. So yeah, I am really enjoying reading this and learning more about this. So I have finished the Stonewall Reader. I will say that the last like section, the after Stonewall part, was a little more tedious to read than the previous two sections. I think that was because like the two, so the first section had a lot of like writers and people who just like really wrote well reasoned and eloquent essays. The middle was like super interesting because obviously it was about the actual events of Stonewall. The last part was like slightly unhinged. There were a couple of like stream of consciousness, like over the top kind of essays where it just felt like, so the first one was obviously like pre-Stonewall when people were very like secretive, and while there was like some momentum for like protest and civil disobedience and like being out and proud, and then when Stonewall happened, then it was like more people were willing to be involved in political action related to the queer community. But that also means that there were people who had like super duper radical ideas. Like two people had essays in which they talked about how like no one's free until everyone's gay, and it just was like the whole thing was very rambly and stream of consciousness. But there were some really great essays too. The very last one was beautiful. It was by Charlene McCrary. It was about her journey to like self-acceptance and like what it was like for her realizing that she was a lesbian, and then like how she experienced like college and early adulthood as a lesbian. And it was just like really interesting, and it also reminded me a lot of my own college days at a women's college and like my own journey to like acceptance of my, not acceptance, but like experiencing and really coming into my own in my sexuality. So yeah, I thought that was a wonderful essay to end on, and overall I did enjoy reading this. It read way faster than I thought it would, and I would say if anybody is looking to like understand just like a blip on the queer liberation movement, this is a good place to start. Especially if you want to know, you want some different perspectives on Stonewall. I think this is a great way to start. So, yeah, I am both excited and nervous about this one. It's gone pretty well so far. So, like, I've been pretty pleased with the first two books. But there are a lot of longer books in here, and there are still some nonfictions in here. I did say at the beginning that I have 2 vetoes. I would like to not use those at all. But if I get another nonfiction, I'm probably going to veto that just because I need some fiction reading right now. So let's see what we get. Oh, okay. All right. So we have Calling for a Blanket Dance, or Calling for a Blanket Dance by Oscar. Okay, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but let me go grab that one. So, Calling for a Blanket Dance is a book by a Native American author, and it's about a boy who is like there's a lot of things going on in his life, and he's kind of like lost, and it's about like his family and community and like trying to like come back to community and family and all of that. So yeah, this sounds like it'll be a really captivating and like a hard read, but also something that I've been hearing really good things about and wanting to read. So yeah, looking forward to hopping into this one. Probably won't do that until tomorrow, but it's my next read. Well, I'm in the middle of painting my fingernails, so I'm gonna be weird. But I am I'm gonna say finally, but not because of anything about this book, but I am finally at the halfway point of this book. I just like, it's been a chaotic couple, like, week or so. And the thing about this book is, like, when I'm reading it, like, I'm really into it, but then I put it down and, like, I'm not driven to pick it up. So that's a contributing factor. But one thing is, when I was trying to look at something in this, I found, no, I'm not gonna be able to find it. Doing this with wet nails was a choice. It was a choice. Oh, apparently this is signed. I got this at the used bookstore, but apparently it's signed, so that was an interesting find. So this is about, it's sort of the story of this family, but all centered around this boy Ever. So like the central family is a woman who is of indigenous descent. So she's actually kind of like, her family, I think her mom is from one tribe and her dad is from another, maybe. But essentially she is from an indigenous background, and her husband is Mexican. And at the beginning of the book, it's talking about how, like, I guess things went badly. Like, there's definitely trigger warnings for abuse and violence and alcohol. And so she took her husband back to his family, and they spent some time there. And then on the way back to the United States, something happens. And essentially there is like this belief in her mother's culture that if a child, because she had baby Ever, if a child is witnesses or is exposed to violence, then it can like soak into them, essentially. So that's sort of like the preface to what Ever's life could possibly look like. And then we see all the different circumstances surrounding his family and his life. And each chapter is a different person. And so we get different perspectives of like their lives, the choices they made, how they interact with Ever, and like what those interactions look like and things like that. And we also see Ever growing through this, because it's like there's also years attached to each of them. And then the last chapter is going to be from Ever's perspective. So it's been really interesting. It's really quick to read and engaging, and I really liked reading it while I'm reading it. But like I said, like when I put it down, I'm not like drawn to pick it back up. So hoping to make some more progress in this and get it finished by the weekend. But I will let you know my final thoughts when I finish it. Well, I finished it, and I like sped through the last half. It was really good. I ultimately am giving this a 4.75. I don't think I would have picked this up as quickly if it hadn't been for this kind of like challenge that I set myself. But yeah, I just like, you just get so embedded in this family and all of the like things happening in their community, and just the way that Native communities like protect their own, and just the culture and the community created around each other was really beautiful to read about. And there's a lot of hard subject matter in here, but I think it's handled really well. And it's ultimately like a book about family and community and culture and survival, and just really, really liked this. So yeah, now I have to pick the next one before my battery dies. So let me do that. So nervous. Oh, all right. So Shy Creatures, which is an ARC that I have that's by Claire Chambers. So I have that on my e-reader. So that will be a change up, because all of the rest of the books have been physical books. So let me grab that. So I am 57% through this, so a little over 50%. Been reading it on my Kindle because it's an ARC. I'll put on the screen when it comes out. I've already forgotten. I really can't put this book down. Like, if I was able to, I would probably read straight through the last half of this book in like one sitting, because it's just so good. Like, I have read 200 pages of this book in like 2 days. It's just so good. I don't think I actually even described this. So I don't think there was a clip before this of me like telling you what the book is about, but essentially it is set in like the late 60s, early 70s, and this woman is working at a mental hospital. She's doing art therapy for the people in the hospital, and we're hearing about her life, and she's in this like extramarital affair, and there's like some very odd, like very messy complications to it. I mean, not that that's not messy, period, but like there's some extra messy complications to it. But this man is discovered having been secluded in this house with his aunts for like 20 years. So like he hasn't left the house in something like 20 years. And it's like, not only are we in the present like learning about what's going on with this woman and her life and like her interactions with him, and her trying to like dig into like what happened and why, but we're also like going backwards in his timeline. So like we're slowly getting these like memorable points in his life and timeline. Ultimately, I'm assuming we're going backwards to the point where something happened that was like the turning point that his aunts like kept him secluded or sequestered in this house for like the rest of his life. yeah, it's very good. Like, it's really well written. I feel like Claire Chambers' other book was really well written. But yeah, it's chef's kiss. I can't wait to keep reading this.
It's very, very rainy. And I have my Swamp Thing mug from Sarah Connor Ceramics. It's a very rainy day today. We are getting the rain from Helene. Possibly some high winds later today. Fingers crossed we don't. But um, it's messy outside. But I am here to tell you about Claire Chambers' book Shy Creatures. So so compelling. I literally could not put this book down. It was so good. Hold on, let me. Okay, sorry, I had something back there making noise. Yeah, it was just so good. So it's about, there's a thing in the back that's like the afterwards that tells you that basically she heard the true story, and this isn't a spoiler. She heard the true story of a boy who, or a man, I guess, who was discovered living in this house and hadn't been seen in like 25 years. So he'd been like sequestered in this house for 25 years and his beard was like 5 feet long. And then like he had sort of a tragic end. And so she heard that story and was just like thinking about it a lot. And so she decided to write a book that gave like a life prior to that, to a fictional life prior to being sequestered for this person, and then a like less dire end to that person's life. And it worked for me in every possible way. So it definitely had that like, you kind of, it's a thing where it's like, you know, something happened and then we're working towards like, how did this happen? What happened? Except because we knew that he was like sequestered in the house, but we didn't know what happened to make that. There were like little hints and stuff. But so some of the chapters have like a date, but they're going backwards. So like we're slowly finding out like key things that happened in his life that made him who he is now. And it goes back to the incident that is the real reason why he stopped leaving the house, or why his family kept him in the home. So that was really interesting, and you're like, really, you want to know what's going on. But there are also all these little reveals about him and about his family, and also about the other characters. So it's like the main protagonist is this woman Helen, who is kind of at a, you know, in a point in her life where like she doesn't like the choices that she's made necessarily, like in her personal life, and she is like, essentially the book says like everything changed or fell apart when the hidden man showed up, which is the guy from the house. And so like we're seeing her life sort of unravel a little bit, and what she does with that. And then we're also seeing, we have the perspective of William, the man who was sequestered in the home. So like we're getting both of their perspectives. His is more like past tense, like past, whereas hers is present day. But yeah, it just, I don't know, like the combination of it worked really well. I was never disappointed to move on to the other person's perspective. Like each time it was done in such a way that like it felt seamless, which I don't think a lot of two perspective books or two timeline books do. But it was expertly done, and the characters were so vivid and interesting, and just there was so much packed into there. I would say there are trigger warnings for sexual abuse. I would say for child abuse, and yeah, and it talks about the war, both the wars at some point, and then for adultery or infidelity, whatever. So like there are some trigger warnings, but in general, I just thought this was an absolutely fantastic book. I ultimately ended up giving it 4.75 because there were like a couple of little things that I felt like she didn't tie up well. And part of that I think was intentional, but the couple of them were points that I really wanted more on and just didn't feel like I got. So overall, that was everything I wanted it to be. It doesn't come out until November. It might be out in the UK, but in the US at least, it doesn't come out until November 12th. So still about a month and some change to go. But yeah, highly recommend that one. Especially if you read our previous book, the one with the oranges on it. I can't think of the name of it. I think it has a lot of the same, like obviously has the same style, which I loved about that book. But I would say that the ending of this one didn't make me want to throw the book across the room like the ending of that one did. So
I just pulled one, but I wasn't recording, so now I have to do this again. Here we go. Oh, that's a short one, actually. That one is Of Women in Salt. So, yeah, that'll be the last one for this vlog. So, I know exactly when I bought this. I bought it at Downbound Books in, I think that's Cincinnati maybe. And I bought it because I used to have this habit of when people would do all those videos about like books they thought would make the women's prize long list, I would like buy those books, like some of those books. And more often than not, that was not super successful. So I've started, so now I wait until the long list comes out and then I like look at all the books on the long list and decide which ones I actually want to read. The last few years I've like tried to read the short list, but haven't successfully done that in a while. But that's a tangent about the fact that that's why I bought this book, is because a lot of people thought it would be on the women's prize list. So I bought it in anticipation of reading it for that. It wasn't on the women's prize list. And so then it just sort of sat on my shelf. And like, for some reason, this, like the cover and me knowing absolutely nothing about it, because I had no idea what this book is about. I've just never picked it up and it never appeals to me. And I'm going to have to say that probably this is, of all of the books that I've read in this video, this is the one that like is kind of a flop for me. And it's mostly like the first chapter I really enjoyed. So I still am not totally sure what's going on in this book or like what the purpose of this book is, like what she's trying to achieve here. But it's all these different women's stories. Most of them are in one family, and then there's two that are in like a family that interacts with the other family so far in like one situation. And I think that it's like telling women's story, the stories of female immigrants. But it's really choppy because you get like, at first I thought we were going to get like the whole family, like up through the ages, but then we're like jumping all over the years. And so like we'll get 2016 and then we'll go back to 2008 and of the same person. So like one person's getting a lot more chapters than others. I just don't think it works. Like I am 110 pages into this and I'm just not super interested. Only have about 90 pages. So like it reads relatively fast. So like I'm gonna finish it, but I don't know. This one is not really going to be a winner for me. I can't see in the next 90 pages anything happening that would take this from like a 3-star to something more than a 3-star for me. Maybe a 3.5. There are better, in my opinion, novels and definitely better nonfiction about the stories of immigrants and people who are in the United States illegally, because like, what is illegally? It's just land. It's all just land. But like, there's better stories. I'm trying to think of the one by oh my gosh, Undocumented Americans. That one is super impactful. Those are like short story, a little bit like essays about specific people, which is sort of like what this is trying to do, but that book does it leaps and bounds better, in my opinion. And that is nonfiction. So these are that's actual people's stories. So like, again, I'm only halfway through this, but at this point I would say like, skip this and read Undocumented Americans. Well, as predicted, this is, in my opinion, mediocre. I think this book is, so I said that it is about like women's immigration stories, and it is a little bit about that, but it's also about like family ties and drug addiction. And I don't tend to enjoy reading about people struggling with drug addiction. Like, I don't know, it's just not something that I want to read about. And so I think had I known that's what this was about, I probably would not have picked it up. But I did. And to be honest, I don't have much else to say about it except that I gave it 3 stars. And I still would say, like, if you're looking for stories about immigration, then Undocumented Americans is a great book. It's nonfiction, it's essays. I don't think I would really recommend this one. But that's it. Those are the 5 books. I enjoyed doing this and reading randomly from my TBR jar. I probably will do this again in the future. I think it was super successful in terms of like, I did read all 5 books I pulled. And I would say, with the exception of O Caledonia and Shy Creatures, the other 3 I don't think I would have picked up anytime soon without this, which is what I really love about pulling randomly from the TBR jar, because that tends to be what happens. I don't get the books that I'm the most excited about. But yeah, I thought this was pretty successful. I think I gave everything but the last one more than 4 stars, so that's pretty solid in terms of reading.